Welcome back. Saturday was the 45th anniversary of Watergate. Tomorrow marks the anniversary of the infamous 18-minute gap in Nixon's first White House tapes. Just months into Trump's presidency, terms like Watergate, from Watergate, like White House tapes are in the news again almost daily. A few other terms that we came to be familiar with during Watergate's special counsel, obstruction of justice, executive privilege, firings to impede an investigation of the president, the Saturday massacre, impeachment. My guest today is Lamar Waldron, author of Watergate, The Hidden History, Nixon, the Mafia, and the CIA. A year ago on this show, Lamar predicted that Donald Trump would win the election because he was using Nixon's tricks. I said Trump was committing treason, which I think time will tell has turned out to be true. Today we're going to be talking about the many parallels between Trump and Nixon, which seem to grow by the day. Lamar Waldron is with us, a political commentator, historian, author, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, Ultimate Sacrifice, Legacy of Secrets. Lamar, welcome. Welcome back.
Great to be back with you, Tom. It's almost a shame, it has been almost a year to the day since I predicted Trump's victory, and I think you've already been proven right about Trump's treason. I was reluctant to agree with you on the air a year ago, but so much has happened since. It would just be ridiculous for anyone to try to claim that he didn't commit treason to win the election.
Yeah. So there are so many parallels between Nixon and Trump. Why is knowing what happened with Watergate important for a generation of people who were probably not even born or children when it happened?
You know what made me feel old was reading about Chris Hayes's TV special on MSNBC about Watergate. And I think it was All the President's Men Revisited, and they commented that he wasn't even born when Watergate happened.
Right.
But yeah, so it's 45 years ago, but it's important now, frankly, more than it was even a year ago, and it's going to be more important a year from now because it's not just telling us about 45-year-old history. It's also telling us what's going to happen to Donald Trump. I can't bring myself to say President Trump, but what's going to happen to Donald Trump, and even how long it's going to take for him to be removed from office. Because there's, people don't really realize unless you live through it like you and I did, just how long it took. I mean, it was over 2 years. So we're going to talk a little bit later about, things, including what's happening in Georgia tomorrow, that could impact that or speed up that time frame. But so far Trump has gone through so many of the steps that Nixon went through. They have these incredible parallels we're just about to talk about. But by seeing what unfolded with Nixon and how he was removed from office, that in many ways provides a template for what can happen with Donald Trump.
Yeah. So didn't Nixon, Trump's mentor was Roy Cohn.
Correct.
C-O-H-N. And he was America's top mafia lawyer. Nixon had this tie to Roy Cohn and to the mafia. First of all, tell us about that.
Well, it's just, you can't make this stuff up. Trump has bragged in his own books and in appearances that his mentor was a New York attorney by the name of Roy Cohn. And I think even in Roger Stone, Trump's good friend's last book, he acknowledged that Cohn was a top mafia lawyer, and everybody else has acknowledged that for years. But Roy Cohn was not just America's top mafia lawyer in the 1980s when he became Trump's mentor. Roy Cohn goes all the way back to the McCarthy 50s and the commie witch hunts, again, terms that Trump loves to apply to himself when they really apply to greatly different things. And so Senator Joe McCarthy is generally regarded today as the leader of that commie witch hunt movement, which basically boiled down to anyone. It was a way to get the liberals. Anyone who was remotely liberal was tarred as being some sort of a communist, and they could be blacklisted, not just in Hollywood, but from their jobs as a school teacher or a college professor. So it was simply a way to get the liberals in America at that time. But it shouldn't really be called the McCarthy era. It should be called the Nixon-McCarthy era, because Nixon far outlasted Joe McCarthy. What happened with Joe McCarthy, who was an alcoholic, drug addict, and he was a closeted gay who beat up the America's top journalist at the time when he tried to expose um, um, Joe McCarthy, again, hearkening back to Donald Trump, calling on people to beat up protesters. But what happened with Joe McCarthy is his top aide was Roy Cohn, and instead of hunting out real communists, Roy Cohn's boyfriend apparently had been reassigned somewhere with the Army, and so he wasn't with Roy Cohn. So Joe McCarthy, instead of just going after liberals, went after the United States Army. And this is when General Dwight Eisenhower was the president of the United States. And so, so Trump did that. And then that's why Roy Cohn later, he was kind of
Trump did what?
Disgraced.
Trump did what? You mean Cohn did that?
Yeah.
Cohn and McCarthy. You mean McCarthy?
I said Trump, and I meant Joe McCarthy.
Okay. So what are the most important parallels between Trump and Nixon?
Well, I mean, they really start with things like their incredible ties to organized crime and the Mafia, which in Nixon's case went back to the start of his political career in 1946 when he got a lot of Mafia money from L.A. gangster Mickey Cohen, and continued all through Trump's presidency. And as we'll hear, I mean, the Mafia and his organized crime ties are what Watergate was all about and what eventually drove Nixon from office. Trump has his own organized crime ties connection, his own Mafia ties, and to criminals from Russia. So again, that's just a huge commonality they have in common, in addition to this man, Roy Cohn. Both men committed, of course, treason to win presidential elections, close presidential elections. Richard Nixon in 1968, when he torpedoed the last-minute ceasefire and peace deal for Vietnam in order to win the election, while also getting a huge bribe from the dictator of South Vietnam. And, of course, another 20,000 U.S. servicemen and women died after that. And, of course, Trump has just committed treason, to win this most recent election. Both are huge bullies who targeted their enemies. That came a lot from Roy Cohn. And Nixon had a mentor who was also a mob lawyer, Murray Chotiner, who and that was their thing, attack, get your enemies, never back down, never apologize, go after anybody who is against you with the full force of everything you can get.
What's the Trump treason? Are you talking about when he called out to Russian hackers to go after Hillary's emails?
Well, I think it goes even deeper than that. I mean, that is certainly treasonous. Coordination between the Trump campaign and the Soviets has not been proven yet.
You mean the Russians?
Yeah.
Your age is showing, Lamar.
Yeah, my age is showing there. But with the Russians, I mean, there is so much smoke there, I'm choking on it.
Yeah.
I mean, of course there was coordination. The timing is too perfect. So, and of course the money ties with Russia, the sleazy money ties, another thing that Trump shares with Nixon. Nixon was actually a very wealthy man who used a mob associate by the name of Bibi Rebozo to hold his money and launder his money, all of these illegal bribes he got from dictators, all of the illegal money he got from big corporations in America, from the super wealthy. And, Trump's, business dealings skirt just inside the law, but there's a lot of shady stuff that has been exposed that may well cross over into illegality there. One of the biggest, of course, parallels between the two is Nixon, along with Senator Joe McCarthy, used fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smears, FIBS, in his campaign for president and vice president. Nixon did. And then, that's the exact same thing that Donald Trump is doing. He's making you fear your neighbor, fear immigrants, ignorance, my God, it's like, he's the perfect opposite of the truth candidate. Bigotry, we don't even have to go into. And, of course, he didn't just smear Hillary Clinton. He smeared all of his Republican opponents. But he had literally found that the more he lied, the higher support he got, unfortunately, among a lot of voting groups in America. And, of course, both people were master manipulators of the press.
Right. Was FIBS, fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear, Was that something is that a phrase that you came up with, or did the Nixon campaign come up with that?
No, that was actually a Republican came up with that. A woman, I believe it was Margaret Chase Smith in 1950.
Huh.
This is, at the rise of McCarthy, and she was basically what we would call today a moderate Republican, an extinct species.
She was using it to describe McCarthy.
Exactly, and Nixon as well.
Wow.
And she never abbreviated it as FIBS, but when she constantly used fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smears, that's pretty obvious. So
fascinating.
So again, they both use the same things. There's a myth that Nixon was hated by the press. Just the opposite. He had 10,000. He called them the 10,000 press people in America that he could call on to get his message out. Watergate was not a factor in the 1972 election, even though it was reported in every major American newspaper and on television, because the press, aside from a handful of journalists, literally a handful.
Hang on, Lamar. We're hitting a break here. Hang on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Lamar Waldron is with us for the hour. We'll be back with more of Lamar